Call this meeting to order. Tla-o-qui-aht Tla-o-qui-aht. And I just want to remind everybody that the meeting is video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Can we have an adoption of the agenda?
Move adoption. Second.
Everybody in favor? Adoption. The agenda passed. Adoption of the minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? All right, all in favor? Passed. Minutes of a special council meeting.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? All in favor? Excellent. Do we have a public comment on any agenda items? Elise?
Yes, 4 people have signed up.
Excellent.
Laura Lauk speaking to item 8.4, and I'll unmute her and allow 2 minutes to speak.
Mayor?
Yes.
I have a conflict of interest
Okay.
due to it's my employer.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I'm going to declare a secondary conflict of interest due to potential fiduciary. What's the word I'm looking for, Elise?
I think it's pecuniary interest.
Pecuniary interest. Thank you. Not fiduciary. Pecuniary interest. Thanks.
Okay, perfect.
So there are 2 people who are going to speak to this item right away, and then we'll have a third after Dan Lewis. So I'll start with Laura Lauk. Laura, you've got 2 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Laura Laux, and I'm here to speak about the Hotel Z liquor license application 8.4. We lived in Tofino for 22 years, and our home is next door to what is now Hotel Z. We have 2 teenage daughters, and as a parent and neighbor, I'm very concerned about this proposal. I asked the council direct staff for feedback on this application from the broader community, including local residents living in the surrounding neighborhoods and local service providers who deal with the harms from alcohol within our healthcare and criminal justice systems. This application is a proposal to offer alcohol in the hotel open lobby and lounge area until 2 a.m., 7 days a week. I have 2 main concerns. The first concern is hidden costs. There are real costs to this proposal, and yet who pays in the end? It won't be Hotel Z. It will be our community and families who pay the costs. It's now known that the direct and indirect costs of alcohol-related harms are 3 times greater for the province of BC than the wealth it generates. We know these costs. That's why there's been such an effort to work with the district to develop a municipal alcohol policy. For example, we now have a harm reduction working group looking at the cost of sobriety sites, the cost of mental health and youth support. This application does not line up with those efforts. My second concern is normalizing an alcohol culture. The overconsumption of alcohol is real, and it's a growing issue in our region. This proposal normalizes a late night drinking culture that's harmful for our community. Statistics show that young people in our area are trying alcohol at an earlier age, more than in any other area in BC. We also know that those people who live closer to liquor serving establishments are more likely to participate in binge drinking and regular drinking behavior. This hotel is surrounded by a community of homes, neighborhoods, and young people. When you're presented with this proposal, please ask questions on our community's behalf. How will our local residents benefit from normalizing late night drinking until 2 a.m.? How are 4 new licensed areas for alcohol in an open lobby going to be regulated and enforced for underage drinking? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Kathy Fick, speaking to the same item. And Kathy, I'm going to turn on your audio right now as well. Kathy, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Acting Mayor and Council. I'm here to speak to item 8.4, which is the application by Hotel Z to increase their hours of serving liquor. I am opposed to this application, and I urge you to consult further with the community on this matter. Here are my views as a resident of Tofino. We are all impacted by this application, not just adjacent neighbors to the hotel. Please let me explain 2 such impacts in which this application is completely incongruent for Tofino residents. Firstly, I believe it's your duty as council to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of this community. And so I urge you to fulfill this duty and protect our nurses, doctors, RCMP, ambulance drivers, and others who are working tirelessly under stressful conditions right now. If approved, this application will set an unprecedented closing time for bars and restaurants in Tofino. And as you may know, well over 50% of the people who present to the emergency department at the hospital after midnight are incidents associated with alcohol. This approval will add to the current community stress by all of our support services. Secondly, just 2 weeks ago, I heard Tourism Tofino say to this council that it is their plan for the coming years that the focus of their tourism promotion is ecotourism. This bodes well in our small geographic area within a biosphere adjacent to a national park and an international bird designation. A business which is intent in encouraging drinking to all hours is completely incongruent with that tourism intent, the natural environment, and the sensitive tourism atmosphere that Tofino is hoping to cultivate and maintain. The colors, the lights, the signs at Hotel Z are in complete disregard for the current OCP and the dark sky policy. Lastly, the whole development is pretty disappointing to me, and absolutely no relaxation to the liquor license or the previous request for a signed bylaw variance should be provided to further promote this business and this kind of crass intrusion into Tofino's accommodation sector. The Hotel Z's request for extended liquor hours are a flagrant disregard for our community support services and our community tourism vision. Please vote to restrict the hours, not increase them. Thank you.
The third speaker is Dan Lewis, speaking to item 7.2, correspondence from Reform BC Mining regarding the request to support mining reforms.
Do we want to invite?
Yes. Oh, would you mind doing that? Thank you. Just a second, Dan. We're just going to get two people back in the room for you.
Okay.
Doing one letter and then we're doing another one.
Yeah. Okay, let me know. Okay, Dan, you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Dan Lewis with the Tla-o-qui-aht Action Conservation Society. I wanted to speak strongly in support of asking Council and Mayor to support the BC mining law reform request. This is a coalition, Tla-o-qui-aht Action is part of it. We're province-wide and we're trying to encourage reform of mining law in British Columbia to avoid scenarios like the Mount Polley disaster that happened in 2014. So the three main goals we're working on right now are to increase community input, influence, and collaboration in decision-making before mining occurs by modernizing the Mineral Tenure Act like Ontario, Quebec, Northwest Territories, and other jurisdictions have begun doing in recent years. Also to protect waters and sensitive areas from certain mining activities by giving the province as well as local and regional authorities the power to designate protected areas and no-go zones. Our organization has been calling for Clayoquot Sound to be designated a no-go zone for mining for many years, and that's partly why this appears in their demands here. Also, the third main goal of the mining law reform is to enforce the polluter pay principle and ensure that projects provide long-term benefits by strengthening our requirements around reclamation of old mines, of which we have several here in Clayoquot Sound. So that's it, no further ado. I just wanted to strongly encourage you to support this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam.
And we have one more speaker speaking to 8.4. So I assume that councillors will leave for the same conflicts of interest identified earlier. And that is Ellen Grip. And Ellen, you can unmute yourself and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Okay, just making sure that you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I would just like to talk about the Hotel Z liquor license applications. Like the ladies before me did a much better job. And yeah, I just read their application and they are saying that noise shouldn't be an issue as there is no residential intermediate affected. I live on 1254. I bought my property in 2017. I live here with my husband and my 3-year-old daughter, and we are literally 12 meters from their construction. We lived here when Jamie's was operating, and the noise and the disturbance of having a liquor license that late is, has strong affected us. So yeah, we just want to ask you as a residents of this community to, please don't let this happen. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Ellen. Just ask, do you mind asking them to come back in here? Thank you, Ellen.
Excellent. That's it for public comment.
Yes, that's it. That's the end.
Okay, I have no mayor's report. I do have something to share, but we'll deal with that under business initiated by council members. Delegations.
There are no
There are no,
delegations.
great. Okay, correspondence. We have correspondence from N. Petricevic, Co-ordinator, Ink Stained Wretches regarding support for local journalism. Comments from councillors?
I would like to quick comment. Full disclosure, this is my stepbrother that has sent this letter, and they just, if I were to surmise, is basically to encourage elected leaders to build an ecosystem in which local journalism can provide vital services to people of the district and beyond, and which is essential to the functioning of a healthy democracy. So what the intent of the letter is to ask council to support this initiative. And of course, I'm talking with our local reporter very recently. He would concur that the issues that were brought up in the letters that were in support of this were very accurate in their description. And so I would very much be in support of council issuing a letter in support of this initiative.
Any other comments from councillors? Yes, Councillor Anderson.
Just a question for Councillor Steer. Do you think that council should support it with the suggested resolution, or do you have another one in mind?
Well, that's a good question. I did in correspondence. The original resolution was about 3 times longer than the one that was previously that is in front of us. So if I don't have any editorial at this point on that, and so in light of the one that's on the table, I would support that one as stands, unless there was something that was troubling you within that resolution.
No, nothing troubling me on it. I'm just wondering if we want to support it, what the best way to proceed is.
Thank you.
Any other input, council?
I'd definitely be in support of moving forward with the resolutions here. I think that we've had demonstrated during the period of the pandemic the vitality of having or the importance of having a vibrant and responsive local news media, including our radio stations and the Westerly and various other sources. And the reality is that all types of media are definitely not always at the most supported. So if we can do one small thing and pass a resolution, not only declaring our support but asking other people to, I'd definitely be in favor of that, council. And I believe the district of Tofino and the people of Tofino definitely, we saw the benefit that we had in having a strong local media presence, and I think reciprocating that just through this is an easy win for us.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? So I'm looking at this resolution. It is rather long, and it has several whereas. Yeah, perhaps we can just do the therefore be it resolved as the resolution. Any comment from staff?
No, it's certainly up to council to edit or make the motion as you see fit. And then staff would just be looking to know what you'd like done with such a resolution. Is it to be forwarded to anyone in particular?
May I make a suggestion?
Yes, please.
I think in the interest, if we are forwarding to any local municipalities, that keeping the context of all the whereas clauses would be important to me. They do make mention of the reasons that we discussed here today that may not always be evident. So if we're going to forward this, for example, to UCOOLIT, keeping the context of the whereas resolutions feels important. And I would make perhaps the suggestion that forwarding to local MP, MLA, BC municipalities, federation, like an FCM would be more than sufficient, and UCOOLIT maybe?
I think it's inherent. Yeah, municipalities, so
Yeah.
UCOOLIT, sure.
Could you repeat that? MP, MLA,
It's definitely at the end of the
In the resolution.
Yeah, and I was just saying, I think that local area, including UCOOLIT, would be sufficient for me.
Excellent. Who would like to?
Since I think I will do that. Resolve that whereas Canada's federal, I'll read the whole thing. Whereas Canada's federal government acknowledged in the 2019 budget that a strong and independent news media is crucial to a well-functioning democracy. Whereas residents of 190 Canadian communities, including communities on Vancouver Island, lost 250 established news outlets due to closing or mergers between 2008 and 2018, and further lost the essential services provided by roughly 2,000 media workers in 100 communities across Canada due to layoffs in only 6 weeks from the time the COVID-19 pandemic began. Whereas at least 13 municipal councils representing more than 1.5 million Canadians have passed resolutions urging elected representatives of provincial and federal governments to build an ecosystem for robust local journalism to serve all Canadians. Therefore, be it resolved that the District of Tofino recognizes that a healthy professional news media is essential to the proper functioning of democracy in our district, urges nearby municipal councils and across Canada to recognize that a robust news media is essential to the proper functioning of democracy in their jurisdictions, endorses legislation and regulations to support and rejuvenate news outlets across Canada, and urges the federal government to move quickly to pass legislation to ensure an ecosystem for a healthy news media to serve all Canadians, and that the resolution be forwarded to the area municipalities, and I think we have it, local MPs and MLAs, the Union of BC Municipalities, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Woo!
Second.
Any other discussions? All in favor? Any opposed? Passed. We have 7.2 correspondence from Reform BC Mining regarding request for support for mining reforms. And this was a letter originally sent to the mayor, which I received. Now I requested this be put on the agenda because I am in favor of supporting this as a municipality for various reasons outlined clearly here. And I think Dan Lewis spoke to those as well. The council would like to comment. Yes, Councilor McQuaid.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. I am in support of quote unquote supporting. So I'm just wondering, whereas there may not be money within the District of Tofino, but within the Clackwood Sound area, I assume that this is a support in theory, not in practical on municipal lands. And then also wondering what form that support takes. An endorsement of the following goals. Is there a motion or a letter, or in which way would we be offering support? Is my follow-up question.
Perfect. So there is, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Just for everyone's information, council did take a resolution to UBCM some years ago in support of reforming the BC mining laws. So this would be in line with that action. can't remember exactly how long ago.
I think it was almost first year Josie came on board.
Yeah, it was during Josie's term.
Mhm. Yes.
I think that motion was basically to do with purely with the Mining Act. And I think, or the mining law. And I think this is the 3 goals stated here is just a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
So I would support the 3 goals as stated. I'm hesitant on goal 2 because I think that needs greater clarification, and certain mining activities to me needs to be better defined. But notionally in the concept I'm in favour of it. So I would support that we sign on and say we support the 3 goals. But I personally would like to see greater clarification on goal 2.
All right. Other input from council? Yes, Councillor Stewart?
Well, I would certainly support without question, but I would once again echo what Councillor McQuaid was at. In what form would this be, and who would it be directed towards?
Yeah, there is, in the letter here, they offer 3 options. Sign on, let us know which of the above goals your organization supports through a quick and simple survey, and we will add your name to the list of supporting organizations, and or invite us for discussion or present a webinar, or share this email with and our online action with your colleagues and networks, or let us know who else we could contact. That is what they're actually asking for. So, we could do the survey and include the request for clarification on goal goal 2. I admit there is no resolution being asked from the letter. Go ahead.
I'm wondering if we extend an invitation, that might give an opportunity to clarify the second goal and to expand on what they exactly mean by support. So that might be one approach. Or we could just pass the resolution to support the 3 goals and leave it at that. I'm not sure.
So there's also, we do, Minister Bruce Ralston is the Minister of Mining and I think Petroleum Products in BC. If we would like to write a letter or something to this extent, that might be a little bit more clear cut, or if we're looking to support, I don't know.
Good questions.
I can start.
Yes, Nyla, would you please?
Yeah, council would like more clarification on the goals. Perhaps a good approach and is supportive is to invite their presentation and have an opportunity to clarify some of the goals before passing the resolution. If that's more than council's comfort level, it looks like it is an option on the letter.
I think there's enough interest in council. I think this bears in our community somewhat and on our province to a great deal. So I'm into it. Should we invite them to do a webinar at one of our meetings?
Sure, I'll support that.
So we can have a resolution to invite Reform BC Mining to deliver a webinar presentation to Tofino Council at a future meeting.
I will second that.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I just think we should be more clear on our resolutions, just for the benefit of staff that's trying to keep track of them.
Can I ask, does it need to be a resolution, or can we just direct staff to have an invited presentation?
Are you looking for staff to receive the presentation or for yourselves to receive?
I believe we would like the webinar.
Yeah. Yes, a resolution would be helpful to invite them as a presentation. So we do have 2 separate types of presentations on an agenda. One is for invited presentations, and they get a little bit more time than a delegation. So by making this motion, you are allowing the presenter to have 5 minutes more than a delegation would.
And just for further clarification, does it have, could this be a committee of the whole as opposed to a regular council meeting?
Absolutely.
Is that official council speak?
We would have to craft that in words, actually. Who would like to do that? For the
I'll take a shot at that.
Or are you comfortable?
I have a motion written if council would like to hear it and
You can add on committee of the whole.
that the BC Mining Law Reform Network be invited to present at an upcoming committee of the whole meeting. Okay.
I will make that motion.
And I will happily second.
All in favor? Unopposed? Motion carried. We have 7.3 correspondence from C. McDiarmid regarding parking on Lynn Road, Chesterman Beach Road, and Osprey Lane. Now, I do believe that Fraser at Work has been working hard on these concerns, and we've addressed this before, so that work continues. Any comments from council?
Just refer this letter to staff till staff reports back on them.
Okay, it is being worked on. 7.4, invitation from Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Climate Leadership Plan Steering Committee to attend Resilience Summit November 6, 2020 via Zoom. Council. Any interest in attending this?
No.
I'm not available.
You're not available November 6th.
Actually, I am interested in this.
The link wasn't working for me. I'm not sure if it was working for everyone else, but did anyone see what the associated cost was, or was it free?
I couldn't do the link. Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, this was an initiative, I believe, sort of spearheaded by Victoria and a number of Vancouver Island municipalities. And it was a meeting brought together at AVICC, I believe. Attended, then Mayor Josie attended. I'm not sure if any other, can't remember any other councillors that attended, but it's about sort of working together across the island to work towards better and coordinated effort towards reducing climate change. So yes, I'd be interested to see where this is has gone and where it might be going. So
excellent. And
I
I
would
think
be happy to attend and report back to council.
I think we'd be happy that you go. Now there is, I do know there is, these links did not work, so you can't see, there was no cost associated, but I assume it would be fairly low. Can we find that out?
Through the chair, there is no cost associated, as Tofino was one of the founding members of this steering committee, and Mayor Osborne was invited, and the invitation was forwarded to Acting Mayor Chalmers for November, but she is unavailable, so it's on the council agenda for someone who would like to attend in Tofino's, or as a Tofino representative, and it is free of charge.
Okay.
I'll nominate Councillor Anderson as District of Tofino's representative.
I'll second that.
Excellent. Any all in favor?
I guess I'm in favor.
Unopposed. Good for you. We have 8.1 presentations and reports. We have an invited presentation from Ian Scott, Executive Director of Tofino Housing Corporation, regarding 2021 MRDT Affordable Housing Plan.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm assuming, unless I hear otherwise, that that you can see me, and I'm going to attempt to share a screen, and hopefully it works. We did test it out earlier, and it appears to have worked. And so I will dive right in without further ado. Thank you again for having me this afternoon and for accepting the submission of the Tofino Housing Corporation's 2021 Affordable Housing Plan. It's a requirement as part of our agreement with the district related to the online accommodation platform, which is the bed tax on Airbnb bookings in Tofino. And that our plan will be combined with the Tourism Tofino Tactical Plan for submission to the province. I do have a bit of a presentation I'd like to make. It is a bit information heavy, but I hope it gives Council a good sense of where we're at and where we're going and how our 2021 expenditures related to the MRDP fit in. Given I'm online, I'm hoping we can just do questions at the end and go from there. Advance. There we go. So in terms of the context, just want to bring you up to date, looking back and then looking forward. So THC was restarted in 2017. We received a small influx of money from the existing affordable housing and amenity reserves, and the district committed to using its land resources, specifically Sharp Road and a portion of District Lot 114 to foster the construction of affordable housing. We used that commitment along with some additional funding received by the district from the sale of the Sea Otter unit, as well as fundraising that we did with Rural Dividends, CMAC, and getting a loan from BC Housing. And then in 2018, a policy change provided another new opportunity. I have it in red because I think it's kind of a game-changing change for communities like Tofino, which was the online accommodation provider tax, the MRDT. And to date, we've received $321,000 from that. And presuming that we continue on with agreement with the district past 2022, this really allows THC to plan forward well for our future activities and future affordable housing development. We then proceeded as part of our business planning activities to confirm that we decided not to be a developer of housing. We wanted to work with the Catalyst Community Development Society as part of partnering with a nonprofit organization who would develop and operate housing. We were successful in rezoning Sharp Road, another big milestone. That led to the transfer of that land to THC, a signing of a lease with Catalyst, which allowed them then to secure a pre-development loan for Sharp Road. And in about March of 2020, CMAC selected the Sharp Road project as a co-investment project. And where are we with Sharp Road today? We're still working through the co-investment confirmation process with Sharp Road. Similar to other government funding programs, both BC Housing and CMAC have the process where the project's selected, but then you have to go through financial reviews, technical reviews, and a variety of different steps before you get final confirmation. We had hoped we'd be under construction by now and through that process, but it's still ongoing, although seemingly trending towards approval by the end of the year, early into the new year, which would allow for construction to start in February, which then turns occupancy sometime in early 2022, spring of 2022. If we shift our attention to DL 114, this past summer, the site was rezoned, and now we're working on the subdivision and land transfer and looking to confirm selection by BC Housing and the Community Housing Fund for that project. We applied in September of this year. 7 projects were announced before the election, and we've been told additional projects will be announced after. There is a chance we're not selected as part of that round of funding, and we can reapply in January for likely announcements in March, April or so. At the same time, we're continuing on our work with BC Housing and technical staff, mechanical review, some more detailed design review. So we feel pretty confident we're going to be selected through one of those 2 scenarios. We've also, and Council's committed to selling Gateway, which would contribute to the overall DL 114 project, along with our projection for revenues from the remainder of 2020 as well as into 2021. And then the land transfers help us secure loans in addition to those funding vehicles to be able to fund about 60% of the cost of building the road and servicing into DL 114 that is not related to that first apartment build. So as we look past the kind of funding scenario, we're into that same cycle that we're in right now with Sharp Road, which is a bit of an indeterminate period of time for that funding confirmation. We may also layer on CMHC co-investment and the timing that takes. And so construction on the DL 114 project is likely later in 2021 and maybe even into 2022. So if we circle back to 2020 for the MRDT Affordable Housing Plan, we had initially projected $265,000 in revenues split between the 4 project areas. Given COVID, we had to rebudget and projected $165,000. We did receive early in the year an initial installment of just under $48,000, and we really refocused our expenditures towards District Lot 114. I think, and it's yet to prove, we do not know the answer yet, but it seems like the COVID recovery has been stronger, and so we're expecting another $125,000 to $200,000 for the remainder of 2020. Airbnb delayed their remittances from Q1 to Q3 as was allowed through the kind of COVID recovery programs. So we don't know how much more money we're going to get for this fiscal year until another 3 or 4 weeks from now. Looking at the 2021 plan, really for Sharp Road, we're just monitoring the construction process. We've contributed all the money to the capital build that we intend to, and it's just a minor activity area monitoring that build process. Once Sharp Road's fully constructed, it's really not a project area anymore from us because Catalyst is managing the operations. DL 114 apartments, like I said, selection by BC Housing, and then moving into that construction planning, that's all Catalyst's job. And then we have more legal work to do with Catalyst around leasing and development agreement, as well as those funders. And then we need to secure and confirm our funding and financing formula for the road and servicing construction not related to the first apartment build. Now that we have gone through the rezoning for DL 114, our plan starts to separate out the apartments and the duplexes. And so now this year we've done some budgeting to take our very initial concept for those buildings into schematic design and more detailed budgeting, and then maybe looking at selling one of those lots to help raise additional funds in late 2021 or early 2022. We also have a staff accommodation project where we're trying to work with local businesses to broker a relationship with a developer and investor, and we have one of those who showed up thus far. And if that crystallizes into something, then council will be informed. And we don't expect to sell any more price-restricted homes in 2021 after the Gateway sale. So from a financial point of view, again, we're projecting $265,000 for next year. Big uncertainty on that number, could be higher, could be lower, and divided up as per the screen and the documentation we submitted, really focused much more on DL 114. Turning to the kind of a budget scenario, just to give you a sense of where we're at, and we do have a number of moving parts. We expect to, if all of our funding comes through, to spend about another $215,000 for the remainder of 2020. I would like to point out, though, a bulk of that is related to both the property transfer of the land from the district to THC, as well as DCCs for the 3 duplex lots. If we then turn our attention to the revenues, we've got about $70,000 in the bank, and I'm projecting as part of this budget $145,000 for that 2020 MRDT, $265,000 for 2021. We have spent more money on the Sharp Road project in terms of pre-development costs than is our commitment under the lease with Catalyst. So when they get the construction financing, we'll get about $65,000 back. And we're looking at about $190,000 from the Gateway proceeds, along with a few other small revenue sources. You do know, or you may remember, that you advanced $75,000 of that potential 145,000. So if we don't get that 145,000, it means is we have to delay some of the subdivision and land transfer components as we move later in the year. Looking to next year, this is just a preliminary draft budget, and we're going to tie this down once we figure out how much money we get from MRDT, but really focused again on DL114 and setting aside that money for the road construction, which may or may not start in 2021, but we need to have those funds available for that process. And then focusing on the duplex design, some more work on the staff accommodation project, and then moving on into 2022. Part of our strategy here is trying to keep quite a large contingency until we've confirmed the loan portions for building the duplex road share of that road and servicing onto DL114, as well as the lot one, the second half, that we're not going to make a cash contribution to. If we're not able to secure those loans, we may have to, or we're not able to secure as much as we've predicted based on having those titles, we may need to expend some more money. If we don't do that, then there's some other project areas that we may turn to, and it's going to partly be informed by the strategic planning process we're engaging in right now. Maybe we advance the duplex pre-development a little bit further. Maybe we focus on the master plan for DL114 that we've talked about in terms of, are there additional lands that would be appropriate to develop as future phases on DL114. Finally, just wanted to take a couple moments to talk about development metrics, just to give you a sense of how the district contributions are making all this possible. Obviously, we haven't started construction on any of these projects yet, but we're getting very close, and groundbreaking will definitely happen in 2021 on Sharp Road and maybe also DL114. If we look at the total per unit contributions, when we consider money that the district has put in or will be putting in, as well as the land value, we're estimating about a $50,000 per unit contribution to each of the 14 units on Sharp Road, and about $25,000 to each of the 72 unit apartment buildings on DL114. If we pull out the land value, which are our estimates, the cash contribution is 22 and just under 10,000. If we look at potential future contributions, so to date, we have not used any pure taxation revenues in any of our work. It has all been from reserves contributed as part of the rezonings or sale of units that have been donated to the district through the rezoning process. But once we get into DCC waivers as per your bylaw, as well as our ask for the frontage improvement waiver for Sharp Road, those start to have real sort of tax payer impacts, and those are approximately 5,000 for Sharp Road per unit and 3,000 for DL114. The one thing I also want to point out for DL114 is that part of where the metrics look quite good on DL114 is because of the success in fundraising that $500,000 from the Rural Dividend Fund, a grant that I'm not confident we'll be able to repeat again. Also, to remind you, we showed you this when we presented the capital plan, but part of the outcome of those lower contributions to DL114 is because of the significant capital grants that we're anticipating from BC Housing, which not only reduce the district contributions, but allow for more affordable rents in that project compared to Sharp Road. We did also indicate that we're not confident whether through this funding cycle we'll get the funding for the second apartment building. And in that scenario, we have two choices. One is to wait and for the next BC Housing funding cycle. The other alternative is to try to advance the project more like Sharp Road, so not quite as low rents. And in that scenario, we'd be looking at probably putting out a little bit more money to bring those rents to the right level. So now we're looking at using, future MRDT revenues to pull off that type of scenario. If we turn our attention to the duplexes, we did a very preliminary design on those, and so this year we start to drill more deeply into the design as well as the costing. So take these numbers with a big grain of salt, please. But we're estimating based on land value and cost about $785,000 per half duplex to deliver. If we focus just on the cost, that's about $600 a unit. And because they have a suite in it, really it's about $300,000 per unit in cost to deliver those units, which is roughly the same metric that we have at both Sharp Road and DL114. And so one of the decisions for THC is how to use those resources. And of course, we want to have an active conversation over time with council about this. But if we just sold at cost, so that's $611,000 per unit, so ignoring land value, what that means is, we're not putting in any additional cash, but we are contributing the land. And I don't want to overstate that land cost, because when you look at the plan for DL 114, we're using portions of land for the duplexes that probably we couldn't have put an apartment building on, and that was part of our strategy. So you got to be careful using that metric. But if we did want to bring the price down with the current cost projections to $550,000, we need to bring, $30,000 per unit to the table, which is more than we're contributing to the Sharp Road and DL 114 projects. And that's then the choice of what kind of housing to provide with our resources, recognizing that we want to finance a broad spectrum of housing, attainable and affordable housing. So just a reminder of kind of what those metrics look like. The other thing to mention is we've talked about selling that duplex, one of those duplex lots, to raise money. And really it's about that pre-development period, as well as defraying some risk. So potentially we could use those titles to borrow enough money to get ourselves to construction on all 3 duplex lots. But now our loan between the road servicing as well as soft costs is, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. We're now borrowing multi-million dollars more to then get through construction and then have to sell. And that's the same risk profile that developers go through, and that's a consideration that THC will be making. So one of the big advantages of selling that lot is to have very little debt on the books when we get to construction, which allows us, depending on scenarios, to delay construction if it looks like the demand at the price point we can achieve is not robust enough. So with that, I'm going to stop and take any questions. Thank you very much.
Questions from council? Yes, Councillor Steer.
I guess it's more a comment. First of all, thank you very much, Ian. I certainly appreciate the amount of information and detail, especially around the budget, around the revenues and expenditures. You've obviously heard some of the concerns around council and that, so I very much appreciate that coming forward. I did have just one question around, you had mentioned briefly about your strategic planning and questions around further development of DL 114 and what that might look like. And I just wanted to reiterate one of the questions that came up, or one of the potentials was that we would also be looking at about not developing and about some of the protection measures that could be in place in DL 114. And I just wanted to bring that forward to make sure that that was part of that conversation moving forward with the potential further development of DL 114. But thank you very much.
Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, maybe just to make one comment. Yeah, I mean, we've heard, or I've heard loud and clear that there's some concerns and questions whether future development, should happen at DL 114, and recognizing that we have no intention of developing the whole thing, that even under the initial scenario we put together, a bulk of the lands would be set aside for conservation. Obviously, by presenting the numbers, part of what I'm showing is the land value that we have not had to expend to get these projects off the ground. And our assumption based on all the surveys is the need is still there and relatively deep. And so if DL 114 is not a piece of land that's appropriate for development, we would need to find something else. And if we're purchasing that land, that makes these projects that much harder to deliver. So we're going to have an active conversation, not only with the community, but with council around how those different elements play out.
Go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Yeah, and while I appreciate that, Ian, I personally, as one member of council, in terms of those needs assessments and what sort of areas that we will be addressing those needs. Will be a conversation through council. As you know, we are moving forward with our housing needs assessment, which will be a little more current from 2015. So we'll have maybe a better idea of the areas of where the housing development may need to take place, and which may or may not include further district lands that may be needed to be utilized. But thank you.
Yes, Councillor Anderson.
Just a comment. I'm glad to see that a developer has come forward expressing interest in working with THC and with the district, perhaps. And so I would encourage that, and hopefully something will come of it.
Just a quick question, Ian, maybe following on Councillor Steers. You mentioned your DL 114 master plan, and maybe if you could just flesh that out a little bit for me, how that looks to you going forward, like the process that THC will follow with that.
So we don't have thank you for the question. We don't have a project identified, but what I do recognize is coming up with if the direction from council was to engage in a process to consider whether and where additional development on DL 114 was appropriate, it would make sense to do a more detailed process. And how we work with district staff and how THC goes about that, whether we can get grants for that process, whether there are other resources to bring to the table, we would have to develop a terms of reference that I would expect, since it's district land, would be endorsed by council, and then we would go through some more detailed work around topography, environmental assessments and features, confirmation of some of our assumptions around geotech, and then working with designers and engineers to confirm, where might there be building sites, what kind of buildings can we put there, and then how we service, the overall master plan strategy. Maybe it's a more reduced scope of work that's a little bit more open-ended around, at a high level first before we go all the way down that path. But it would definitely involve a process of figuring out what the right terms of reference is on that piece of work, and how THC is going to work with the district on that.
Thanks, Ian. Any further questions for Ian?
I can learn to understand you much better.
Pre-recorded questions? Siri.
Don't know what's happening.
Siri's butting in. Thanks. Thank you very much, Ian, for that presentation. I did appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
(8.2), we have a 2019 audited financial statement amendment. Two of them, I think. Amendments. Nyla.
I can speak to that.
Perfect.
So there were two typos and errors in the financial statements, which doesn't typically happen. The order of reporting that we typically do means we do data and statistical reporting to the province prior to approval of the financial statements in front of council, but everything was kind of backwards this year. So I noted two typos that I thought were significant enough in the financial statements that I wanted to bring them forward as an amended set of statements, and they'll be resubmitted to the province. So I indicated what the two errors were. One was a typo with respect to equity and tangible capital assets having an extra 3, showing 333 million, which is very different than 33 million. So I wanted to make note of that. And Schedule 2 on page 24 of the financial statements has been replaced with a new schedule indicating an accurate amount of use of gas tax funds, as well as the administration and corporate services own source revenue.
Thank you for that. Okay, just going to say, do we have any questions for Nyla?
Move that the 2019 annual report be received as amended at note 14 of the 2019 audited financial statements, and by replacing Schedule 2, page 24 for the year ended December 31st, 2019.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed. Motion passed. Thanks, Nyla. 8.3, zoning and bylaw amendment, childcare report from community sustainability. Aaron, I think we can't hear you if you're saying something. We can't hear you, Aaron.
Doesn't look muted.
No, it's not muted.
Restart, that's a Zoom tech.
No.
Sometimes if they rejoin, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you can even do that.
Yeah. Through the chair, if council wanted to amend the agenda to move on to the next item, we could hear from the manager of protective services regarding piece point 4, and we'll allow some time for Aaron to.
Sure.
Yeah, we can't hear you still, Aaron. Sorry.
We're going to give you some time, Aaron. We're going to switch the items.
Do we need a quick motion for that?
Yeah, that would be great if council through the chair wouldn't mind making a motion to amend the agenda to hear 8.4 before 8.3. And we'll ask that, because it's not part of the motion, but I'll just ask Aaron to maybe get out and get back in.
There we go. So you need that from the chair?
From anyone on
I'll
council.
move that.
Second.
All in favor? Excellent, thank you.
And then I'll declare a conflict of interest.
And I'll declare the same as
The same.
one from the beginning of the meeting. Thanks.
Go ahead, Brent.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we are here to discuss the liquor primary license application for Hotel Z. I understand that there was some correspondence earlier and some comments. So we have been through a few liquor license applications before. I don't have a presentation. The process is relatively straightforward, but I do understand that there may be some questions with this particular application. So I'll put it back to Mayor and Council to let me know if there's any specifics that they would like to address. Yeah.
And that, sorry, Brent, that was specific. So this motion is just to
this motion is
right.
to discuss whether council would like to opt in to providing comment regarding the license application or choose to opt out and leave that to the licensing branch. So if there's any questions around that process, I'm happy to speak to those. I know we have been through a few of these, but it never hurts if any refresher is required. Sure. So let me know.
Sure. Sorry, I was going to clarify. You do you want us to be specific in our requests to you about what we would like you to ask the public? That's not what you're asking, right?
No, so this process to opt in or opt out. So at this point, the application has been made to the licensing branch, and the local authority has the opportunity to decide if they would like myself to collect the views of the community in regards to the application, or if we would like to opt out and have the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch collect the views and the opinions on their for themselves. For the last number of applications, council has resolved to opt out. However, every scenario is different. yeah, so that's where we're at today, looking to see which route council would like to go.
Excellent. Okay, questions from council? Yes, Councillor Steer and then Councillor McMaster. Or McMaster.
Just a question for Brent. I know we often tend to opt out, but can you remind me what we actually did when Jamie's was asking for the extension, which got denied? Did we opt in or opt out?
So at that process in 2015, council chose to have staff collect the views and opinions. And so in this process, when staff collects the views, council also has an opportunity to provide any particular comments, whether they support it, whether there's additional things to be considered. If council chooses to opt out and not collect the views themselves, then they do not have the opportunity to provide any further comments.
Okay, well, we'll see, but I would definitely be in favour of opting in.
Opting in. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Brent, and you answer my question. Just council also, as well as yourself, council will have the opportunity to provide input into it as well, not just the neighbors and community. And so I was just going to speak in favor, as Councillor McMaster pointed out, that certainly I would be very much in favor of the opt-in option to provide comment through your services, and then also from council to provide its comments. Very strongly support that.
I also would like to opt in.
Okay, Brent, we are unanimous in our desire to opt in and provide input.
We've been provided with the.
Yeah, I can read the.
Just let them know, so let's go.
So we need to move the first one separately.
So
I'll move that one. I'll move that the staff report application for liquor primary license Hotel Z dated October 27th be received.
Second.
All in favor? Motion passed.
And then I'll move that council provide direction to staff that staff proceed to gather the views of residents potentially impacted by Hotel Z's application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, LCRB, for a liquor primary license for the purpose of providing the LCRB with a council resolution on whether the application should be approved.
Second.
All in favor? Motion passed. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you very much.
Let's get the councillors back in the room.
Excellent.
Aaron, do you want to try and speak?
You hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you. It's very quiet. I wonder if there's a way.
Can you hear me now?
Just a little. Yeah, like that's even better.
Well, that's a better one.
Can you try and say a few words in a row?
How about this? Can you hear me if I talk like this?
Wonderful.
I'm just cranked the volume on the mic, so.
Thank you.
You're loud and clear.
Oh, it's so great. You can all hear me now. Okay, I'm just gonna share my screen. I think we're doing childcare.
Correct.
Great. I'm assuming you can all see a bear and a graphic that says zoning amendment childcare.
Yeah.
Great. So my first presentation today is a zoning amendment for childcare. The background to this report was generated through a number of council resolutions earlier this year. There's also in our strategic plan, or the 2019 to 2022 strategic plan, some direction about childcare. The VQA provides support for the community and for initiatives such as this, and there's also support in the official community plan supporting the zoning amendment. The intent of the zoning bylaw amendment is to clarify what is currently existing, to align ourselves with existing provincial regulations. There are three options, I believe, for council consideration. One would be a blanket approach allowing childcare uses in most of the commercial zones. Council may opt also to rezone based on applications by landowners or operators, so that would be on a per application basis. And finally, a third option is for staff to go through and review each commercial zone and lot to provide individual analysis and recommendations. Staff are recommending option 1 and wanted to make sure that Council understands while we have the authority as the District of Tofino over uses, the actual creation, approval, and operation of childcare spaces is ultimately regulated by the province. Staff are also recommending waiving the public hearing. I'd like to get any questions or comments at this time.
Yes, Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate once again. I very much support the option number 1. It's basically reducing that, basically another hurdle for someone to be involved in providing this potential childcare service in our community. I had two questions. One surrounds why the recommendation to waive the public hearing. I'm assuming maybe is it COVID related, or is there another reason? Is it to expedite this, or I'll let you explain why.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. The decision or the request or the recommendation to waive the public hearing was one, this was a council generated request, like a recommendation for staff to go out and do this. It is something that's supported in the official community plan, which is why we have the waiver rules in the Local Government Act. And yes, definitely in respect of COVID-19 restrictions. It's not to say that we couldn't do a survey through the community through a web form or an online presence, but the public hearing processes can be somewhat onerous, and I feel this one has sat for a long time and recommended the waiver for that reason.
Okay. I agree and support. And I had just in that initial notice of motion back in January, one of the discussion points or tasks, I guess you could say, was about discussions with SD70 staff on the potential daycare spaces at Wickaninnish Elementary School. And as I'm sure you're well aware, that at Ucluelet Elementary School, that discussion is going on with the seismic upgrading. Has there been any discussions? I recognize COVID came in shortly after this, and that had changed a lot of people's agenda. Just wondering if there had been any progress with Wickaninnish Elementary or SD70 in terms of that discussion.
There has been no discussion from Community Sustainability Department. I don't want to speak for Ms. Akiana, but there may have been conversations between our daycare and the school, but that I'm not aware of. It's something that I could look into probably in the next month or so, now that I have a recreation program or one in place.
No discussion.
Thank you. And then just I think one of the other recommendations was to lobby the provincial government for the implementation of a universal childcare, and I think we have probably access to an MLA now that will definitely be hearing some lobbying efforts from the District of Tofino. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate your report.
Councillor Steer, anybody else?
Support.
I'll move, yeah, I just had to find it, sorry. 8.3, the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1288-2020 attached as appendix 1 to the report titled zoning bylaw amendment childcare dated October 27th, 2020 be introduced and read a first and second time, and that the public hearing for District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1288-2020 be waived, and that the staff be directed to publish notices advising the public of the waiver of the public hearing for District of Zoning Amendment bylaw number 1288-2020.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Unopposed? Motion passed. We are moving on to 8.5 COVID-19 special event permit process. Report from Public Spaces, Cultural and Visitor Initiatives. Hi, April.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me all right? Great. So this change to the district's event permitting process is by and large an administrative exercise, but due to the very public nature of community events, staff is bringing forward a report to council in order to be as transparent as possible about the change in procedure. So under this new and hopefully temporary process, events will be required to submit a COVID-19 event proposal along with their event permit application. And this will allow staff to determine if the event, as proposed, meets criteria under provincial health guidelines and can safely proceed on public property. And this tool is also intended to aid event organizers in developing their own COVID event safety plans. It's recognized that COVID-19 is a very fluid situation and that these tools and this process will be living documents and reflect the most up-to-date version of the order of the provincial health officer for gatherings and events. And if there's any questions from council, I'm happy to answer those now.
Thanks, April. Any questions from council?
I did have like a little bit of a question, if that's all right with you.
Please.
I'm sorry, I just need to find my notes on it. So in terms of, so just to clarify, are these provincially mandated that they be in place for each municipality, or are these just public event guidelines? Like, is this, like, I was just wondering where this was coming from, if we could have some clarity on that.
Sure, absolutely. Through the chair. So the district's public property use bylaw states that events on public property of more than 12 people are required to obtain a special event permit through council, or if it's a recurring event that has been previously permitted, staff can approve that event permit. So the provincial health orders restrict events over 50 people, and that leaves a 38-person somewhat of a gray area where events may be able to take place, but of course we want some reasonable precautions in place in order for them to be approved and to take place. So that is what this is trying to address. It's not that we're ushering in huge events. It may be a local nonprofit that wants to hold an informational booth on public property, or it may be a walk, a fundraising walk or something like that. And so we have had a couple of inquiries, and with this being with us, the COVID-19 health situation for a while, we thought it was reasonable, as staff thought it was reasonable to bring forward some sort of a process for these events to be considered at least.
Yeah, thank you for that, April. I wanted to just also say that this was like, this all looks really clear and easy, and I understand the burden of putting on small events these days and how closely capacity and cost can be related. And I think it really looks like staff took time and attention to make sure that this wouldn't provide undue burden to small events. And I'm really grateful for that attention. So thank you for the clarity, and thanks for the work on this.
Thank you.
Excellent. Further comments from council?
I'll move that the report titled COVID-19 Special Event Permit Process be received for information, and that staff be authorised to implement the new District of Tofino COVID-19 event proposal process as outlined in the report dated October 27, 2020 as part of the special event permit process for special events happening on public property.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor? None opposed, motion passed. Thanks, April.
Thank you.
8.6, permission to proceed for 1141 Pacific Rim Highway. Aaron.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, I'm assuming you're looking at some trees and ferns at this point. This is a zoning amendment for Crabapple Campground. The applicant is Matt Min. The address is 1141 Pacific Rim Highway. This report is coming to council as a permission to proceed report in support of a rezoning application. So a little bit of background. The application was received February 14th, 2020. There is an existing temporary use permit supporting the use of the property as a long-term staff campground, which was issued in 2016 and renewed again in 2018. The current TUP and the final TUP will expire in October 2021, about a year from now. I think we're all familiar, but in case we're not, the location is outlined in bright red. On the right of your screen, you can see what is now the Sea Otter development. To the left is the land known as Tinwis, and then south you can see there's Helson Drive. The zoning amendment would permit up to, the proposal would permit up to 45 long-term staff accommodation campsites and 50 residents. I believe the regulations right now have that at 70 residents. The other existing uses that currently are on the property, such as a single family dwelling and the on-site business, is also being requested to be moved forward into the new zoning amendment. And the additional requested permissions include home occupation permissions for the campsite residents and dropping the current requirement for campsite residents to be employed in Tofino. As with all zoning applications, we like to look back to our policy and then use that as a framework to review applications. And so, looking at the vision to action plan, we can see that there is alignment with that plan and the applicant's proposal. The official community plan has also been reviewed, and this is an important one, as we shouldn't be zoning things in opposition to official community plan provisions. And so in the current OCP, the areas that the lot is designated as Mackenzie neighborhood. That speaks to a residential neighborhood with small commercial elements, an average net density of 8 units per acre. For comparison, the proposal has a density of roughly 26 units per acre. For comparison, Sea Otter across the street is about 11 units per acre. In the new official community plan, which is yet to be adopted or reviewed by council as a whole, there are no density restrictions. There's land use designations and policy around what the community might want to see in areas, but no actual density restrictions. But there are other policies that may conflict with the current proposal. Staff will be looking at density closely should the application proceed. There are two sort of major things that we look at in any land use application, and that is use and density. The other aspects of the development are in line with OCP's goals and policies. We've also looked at the affordable housing needs assessment, which is the district's sort of go-to for affordable housing or staff housing type applications. The gaps found in the assessment have relevance to the proposed development are affordable rental accommodation with appropriate facilities for seasonal employees, permanent year-round rental housing, interrupted seasonally, most critically for low-income residents, but also modest income residents and especially those with children. I would say that the current TUP accommodates both of these gaps. There is no housing agreement, although with the current TUPs. The affordable housing needs assessment also provides a little bit more information on what people in 2015 were looking for in terms of accommodation. 8.7% of the year-round residents of Tofino noted RV and trailers with preferred accommodation, and 43.5% found it acceptable. In terms of people who are seasonal residents of Tofino, there were 11.4% found it as preferred accommodation and 51.9% found it acceptable. This is more just to give some flavor to the housing needs assessment and not necessarily something that staff would use as a determinant, but definitely is something that helps provide some context. As one would expect, in most cases, single family dwellings, duplex, townhouse, and apartments all rank significantly higher in terms of preferred accommodation. In terms of zoning, the property is currently zoned small holdings district, A1. This is a 2-acre size lot, allows single family homes and associated use. In that zone, you can build a caretaker cabin. And so with the current building on the site, the actual zone density right now is about 1 unit per acre. A new comprehensive development zone would allow land. It would include, as we've talked about earlier, the single family dwelling, home occupations, accessory buildings and uses, up to 45 units of camping sites, shared washing facilities, and shared laundry facilities. So in terms of land use considerations, form and character, what does long-term accommodation in recreational vehicles look like in the over time? So staff would like to delve into that a little bit further. Staff believe that a housing agreement should be required as part of the zoning application. And in terms of the home occupations requested by the applicant, staff would like to some time to review those further with both the applicant and looking at some best practices. Further land use considerations, a traffic impact assessment will be required as part of a referral process. Servicing brief will be required. Once we have a more firm idea of what the application will look like at first reading, staff would like to review it again through the multimodal transportation lens. We'll want to check in with the fire chief and emergency program coordinator on flooding, tsunami, and fire suppressions, and that'll be again through a referral process. And then staff would also like to discuss community amenity contributions to the application of the applicant, understanding that if there's a housing agreement in place, there are some exemptions possible. So options today, for council, we have grant permission to proceed. We can reject or refuse the application, or council can defer or otherwise deal with the application. Staff are recommending permission to proceed with the application. So our next steps would be receiving some council feedback today, further research on best practices and other items identified in this report, and also further discussion with the applicant. Following that, we would be drafting a bylaw for first reading and bringing that back for council's consideration. And if the bylaw received first reading, into the referral process so prior to second reading. Thank you. Questions, comments?
Council, yes, Councilor Anderson.
Aaron, it wasn't clear to me in the report, under the current temporary use permit, what kind of density and uses are allowed?
The current density, as I understand it, is there's 45 campsites there. I'm not sure exactly how many are operating now, but that's what the TUP allowed, and 70 people. And I believe the zoning application would permit 45 units and 50 people. So reduced amount of people, same amount of units.
Okay. Another question I had, in terms of RV use, I understand that some RV campsites are set up with sewage, water, and electric hookups. Has any of that been considered in the servicing of it, in servicing of the proposal, or even under the temporary use permit? Is any of that provided?
Great question. So the answer to the first part is we would be reviewing servicing after first reading of the bylaw, as we do with most applications, to ensure that we have the district services to provide water and sewer, drainage. And then the second part of the question is the applicant has developed washrooms and is tied into our sewer and our water systems, and I believe has an island health permit as well. So for the temporary use, I believe they're meeting all their expectations. And then again, for the zoning, because if we were to move forward and it became a permanent use, we'd do a little bit more detailed analysis of what that servicing might look like and whether we can accommodate it.
Yeah, I'm concerned with the proposed zoning about there's some health and safety issues as well as impact on the neighborhood. But certainly sanitary, sewage, water hookups, electricity hookups, and then some fire suppression issues are the types of things I would be looking at. And then just sort of to wind up my comments before I pass it on to other councillors, I'm in support of having a housing agreement. I think that if the property changes hands, or there's no guarantee that this type of housing would be for people that lived and worked here. It could be just sort of a transient campground or a commercial campground almost. So the housing agreement, I think, is quite important. I'm not in support of the proposed density. I think it's too high. I'm not sure where it should fall, but I think that's quite a lot for that parcel. And I'm not in support of the home occupation uses. So that's where I'm at right now. I might have more as we hear more, but those are my concerns. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor McMaster, and then Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I echo what Councillor Anderson just said. I find it hard to believe with 45 units, there's 50 people in this town. I think that there'll probably be more double occupancy than per unit. So the density certainly needs looking at. And that's all I have to say.
Councillor Steer.
Thank you. Once again, I echo many of the concerns of Councillor Anderson and in support. What I would also, the one area that I would like more information on is in the area of the home occupation. Just my understanding, Aaron, is that we in a comprehensive development zone, we would be able to very specifically identify the types of home occupation that could be allowed in the development. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And then my primary concern of the whole thing is the health and safety of the occupants and the safety of the occupants and the residents of the development should never be compromised by affordability. So those emergency considerations, I will be very interested in having that report coming forward to identify any potentials and hopefully within there the mitigation measures that could be employed to mitigate it. So those are my main concerns, and I would be in support of home occupations, but very specific in their nature. And we don't need to go into the details of what those might be, but I can think of examples of where, anyways, we don't need to go into it now. I'll let it go on to further councillors' comments.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. Yes.
Yeah, I'd be supportive of permission to proceed with some concerns as well. I echo a lot of what's been said. I do have some concerns about the home occupations with the density and home occupations about what the impact on each other would be. So with what Councillor Steer had about being a bit more prescriptive and understanding what that looks like, I share the concerns about the health and safety, and definitely would like to see just draw a blank, a housing agreement. I think that'd be really important. And those are my big ones.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll start. Thank you. I'll start with the home occupations. I mean, I assume Councillor Steer and Councillor Chalmers are both gesturing to things like bookkeeping or bicycle repair, and that we're falling outside the realm of allowing for manufacturing or something like that to occur. But I think that that's definitely something that we can navigate as a council, because I think that those are entirely viable ways of maintaining a living. So I definitely think that those are viable ones for me and to continue talking about. I actually was wondering if I might get a little bit of history here. I do understand that this TUP was renewed, and I was wondering if there was any of these concerns that were brought forward to the applicant on the renewal of the TUP a second time. And I had a further question. When reading kind of the complications between the current OCP, the upcoming OCP, and the zoning around the rest of the campsite, I do understand that we use a TUP as a mechanism to allow people essentially to try things out in a certain area where it wouldn't have previously been allowed. But there seems so much that kind of goes against this TUP in the first place that I'm wondering if the TUP was allowed, this campground was allowed to take place there, if there was the thought around it that this particular situation would one day arise and we would come to a crux where it seems like everywhere we turned there was something blocking its progression. And I just wonder if we take that into account at all when we put TUPs in certain areas where we may be shooting ourselves in the foot for ensuring that it can go forward. I wasn't on council in those instances, so I was hoping that maybe other councillors could be, or staff could provide context to how that played out.
I'm happy to provide the information that I have, and would happily take any comments or corrections from council. The temporary use permit, the first temporary use permit was issued post a complaint about staff housing on that site, and staff worked with the applicant to develop a TUP that was based on our campground bylaw and our mobile home bylaw, in recognition of the fact that this housing was needed in the community, and there was no one else providing this type of application. And to the applicant's credit, did a really good job with it, and met the conditions under the TUP. And then when it came back to council in 2018, I don't believe we changed anything, but all through the process, staff and I want to say at the council table, if I remember correctly, there was no indication that this was a use that could continue in perpetuity. It was the way that I would frame it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that it was a measure that we had in place until such time as we had other options, and most notably the THC projects in place. And so, to your point, we're now at a situation where the TUP is expiring in a year. We haven't developed a lot of other affordable housing. There has been some, suites built in vacation rentals and such, but nothing significant. And so, yeah, we're at this time now where we have to really look at this as not as a short-term temporary use permit. And temporary permits, remember, are for economic opportunities and temporary uses. They don't connote something that's going to exist in that way. I think staff understood that the applicant was interested in having a discussion about what this might want to be other than a campground at some point, and I'm not sure the applicant is there yet. And part of bringing this application forward and supporting is that staff feel that there is still room and time to have that conversation with the applicant. I can't really speak to the new OCP yet because I don't want to get too far into that until council's had a chance to look at it. I can tell you that staff are looking for solutions in recognition of the continued housing shortage in the community.
Thank you so much for that. And I really do appreciate the context. And I think that kind of when I looked a little bit at the history of this, I think we've actually also, for this councillor, I've come a long way in understanding what an ecosystem of housing looks like. And I appreciate the recognition that, we did license this understanding that affordable housing wasn't moving or wasn't available. And I think now for this councillor, there's also a recognition that these types of housing and this type of living is a choice for some people. And it is, while I understand that it may not be the preferred option as the context you provided, it is one that people are taking advantage of. And I'm grateful for staff's recommendations that there are solutions to be talked about and found here, and the recognition that policy is created by people and that good people are looking at this. So I'm really thankful for this report. Again, the only further question I had was there was a portion in there that spoke to not wanting anyone that was outside of Tofino or that wasn't working in the District of Tofino. And I wonder if we might take some small recognition for the fact that we may be in a pandemic situation for the next 3 years, and there was note of not, in recognition of working remotely, we might want to take that into account. So I don't pretend to know how these next 3 years are going to play out, but some flexibility around remote work might be appreciated, and understanding that perhaps even if you are employed elsewhere in the region, and working remotely, that there is some room for that, in my opinion, in this application. So thank you so much for this, Erin.
Yes, Councillor Anderson.
Erin, I'm wondering, since when we first considered the temporary use permits, we thought that maybe it wouldn't become a permanent situation. And I'm just thinking, in light of that, is it possible to apply for another temporary use permit with different uses, but similar? For instance, if some mobile homes were allowed, or tents were removed, or is temporary use permits limited just to 2, no matter what the uses are?
That's a great question that I've been thinking about all day. I would want to get a legal opinion on that. My gut feeling is that if we amended it and it was significantly different, or more, that would be definitely a possibility for the applicant. What I want to ask the lawyers is like how different, and to make sure that we weren't, pushing the authorities of that, granted us the Local Government Act. So I think it may be a possibility. I'd want to, it's something that if it comes up with the applicant, we can talk to, we'll put a call into our lawyers.
It might be a way council would like to proceed if they want to allow for this type of sort of camping living, but maybe not make it permanent. So I'd like to hear that opinion. Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions for Erin? I concur with councillors' views, density, further looking at home occupations, health and safety, all those things. I definitely concur. Housing agreements, you mentioned, and I'm in favor of housing agreements being looked at as well. So just a question generally about the OCP, and maybe we can talk about this another time, Erin, but it's that there is no density restrictions in the new OCP. There is generally density guidelines, though, is there not? I seem to remember from our open houses and the OCP review.
Yes, correct. I mean, again, this is a document that we've seen in pieces, and it does remove the specific densities that occur in the OCP, and that follows best practice. But there is policy supporting certain types of uses and size of lots and type of housing, form of housing. And so, it does speak to density, just not in specific numbers. And what it does is allow council and staff to consider applications that might not meet a certain bar because it's just a number. And so I think it will allow the community to make probably better decisions than an arbitrary number. I think in speaking about density in this application, it's probably the biggest hurdle under the current OCP, because again, we have to zone in compliance, with the OCP, and right now the OCP is saying 8 units an acre, and we're looking at 26 units now. So I think that's going to be under the current OCP the biggest hurdle we have, and then the next OCP, it talks about no density, but the land use designation is currently resort commercial. It actually would probably permit depending on what the application was, a commercial campground there. And again, the OCP is not complete yet. This is not a bad time to be having this discussion because we can look at this and consider land use in the long term and think about what's most appropriate for there. And I think that's the biggest question, other than density, is what's the appropriate use for there for the next 50 years. In a lot of ways, a commercial accommodation camp or even a resident campground isn't the worst use because it's not permanent, so to speak. There's no building there. It's something that can be reused for another use in the future. And finally, I'll just add one extra little twist to this, is that we understand that there may be some work happening on the neighboring property that looks a lot like a campground as well. So there's definitely action in and around that area. The resort at the far end of the road is also looking to develop. And so there's this area of town might get quite busy quite soon. And I think we're going to want to be really careful about the permissions that we consider. And then maybe once we get past the density and use questions, that really start thinking about traffic and road safety in that area as well. Anyways, there's a lot to discuss about this location.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks. So density is an issue and a growing issue. Pardon the pun. So I sense that everybody's willing to move back here.
Move the recommendation that council grant permission to proceed with further review of the application for a zoning amendment at the 1141 Pacific Rim Highway.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Aaron. I think you're up actually again. So 8.7 development variance permit for close property, 1465 Braden Road.
Great, thank you. And for the third act, I'm presenting a development variance permit for 1465 Braden Road for the Close family. So this is development variance permit 0920. The intent is to vary District of Tofino subdivision development control bylaw number 1201/2014. This variance is probably similar that many councilors may have seen already to waive a 10% parcel frontage minimum for the proposed new lot to be accessed via easement. This is a similar type of variance that we use for panhandle questions. The variance will allow will be a part of the subdivision process plan proposed in 2016. So in 2016, the lot was rezoned to accommodate the subdivision that's in front of council today. This is the lot outlined in red. The area in the bottom left, 1476 was zoned and then subdivided as part of the first part of this application. And the second subdivision is in the area to the northwest around the second cabin. And there'll be a further photo to help show that. So this is the area that's currently zoned RA2. And again, it was zoned in support of the subdivision. The access that requires the variance today is that line going through the middle of the property, a currently existing road that also has servicing for both residences. Looking through the criteria that we use for variances, the proposed variance will not result in a physical change to the property or affect the neighborhood further. No change is expected in terms of protection or preservation of natural features, as no additional construction or disruption to the lot is expected. There's no change to design. The buildings that the easement will service are existing. The siting, again, no changes to the building, so no siting issues, no changes in terms of neighboring views. And allowing for flexibility in building design without impacting neighboring properties. The siting will allow the proposed subdivision with minimal impact to neighboring properties, including those proposed by the current subdivision application. The public realm will not be impacted. Further comments from nearby property owners have been solicited through the process. I'm not aware of receiving any feedback on that. I did speak to one gentleman, his neighbor, who was in support. Staff notified surrounding neighbors on October 16th. Other than one phone call I received, no other responses were received. Staff are recommending approval. Other options would be to refuse the application or defer the application. Any questions or comments?
No questions or comments from council? Anybody anybody like to move?
I'll move the council approved development variance permit number 09-20 for lot 1, district lot 258, Clackwood District Plan EPP 79177 as follows. Vary part 21 of the District of Tofino Subdivision and Development Control Bylaw number 1201-2014 to permit frontage of less than 10% of the parcel perimeter as shown on Exhibit A to DVP 09-20.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.
Bylaws 9.1. District of Tofino Liquor Control and Licensing Application Procedure Amendment Bylaw. This is for adoption.
I'll move that the District of Tofino Liquor Control and Licensing Application Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 947.02.2020 be adopted.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. District of Tofino 2021-2024 Taxation Exemption Bylaw.
I'll move that the District of Tofino Taxation Exemption Bylaw number 1297-2020 be adopted.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. District of Tofino Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw.
I'll move that the District of Tofino Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 1271.03/2020 be adopted.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Now, thank you for that. 10, business initiated by councillors. We have Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Mayor Law. This is we have our West Coast Committee of the ACRD, and we at that meeting. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights that transpired there. There were some really interesting things, and the first one was the West Coast Landfill Ocean Legacies Ocean Plastics Recycling Agreement. And this was a pilot project, a 5-year pilot project that was here and in Powell River. And the project was aimed at to reduce the amount of ocean waste and fishing gear polluting the West Coast and divert those materials from the West Coast landfill. This was funded through a DFO grant, of which the ACRD was the partner in that grant, which was accepted, or which we received. And so the gist of it is that these materials will be collected at the West Coast landfill and then transported to the Ocean Legacy Foundation's processing plant, which is in Delta, BC. And it is going to be for 5 years. If those of you spend any time out at the landfill, as I do, you'll notice that they've already been stockpiling quite a bit of this material. And so we're hoping that this initiative will have some real benefits to the West Coast. The other really exciting one was the West Coast Landfill Economic Analysis Report. It was fascinating, informative, excellent dinner conversation with family and friends. Anyways, in that report, and it was basically, it was addressing issues that have been stemming from 2007. In 2007, there was a solid waste management plan which identified a non-compliance with our leach-it system out at the landfill. And in 2019, once again, the West Coast Landfill Report identified those issues still remain. And so this economic analysis were on basically 2 options that were presented. In a nutshell, one was to fix the problem, which was the leach-it system and the costs associated with that. Within that, there would also be an expansion of the landfill to extend its length of life. The other option to deal with the issue was to close the landfill, create a transfer station there, and truck our waste to Port Alberni. In the analysis, after the economic gave in great detail, I do recommend reading the report if you've got the time and energy, that the recommendation was to move on the improvements to the leach-it system and the expansion of the landfill itself. And within that report, there was also I just wanted to make a little note here that in that report, not just the economic analysis, but there was also the report included a cost to the environment, hence the creation of the greenhouse gases, and that was used in that analysis as well. So that the West Coast Committee recommendation was to bring it to the ACRD board with a recommendation that we move with the option of maintaining the landfill and fixing the problem at the leachate. There is definitely a cost associated with that, and the upcoming ACRD board meeting will probably be going into, I'm sure, more detail on that. So there will be some further questions about how that allocation to the taxpayers through the ACRD will be coming forward, and I'm sure probably our CFO will be involved in those conversations, I'm sure, as I've already mentioned to them. So the other it was there was a successful application grant through the airport, which is that there was a portion of upgrades that were needed to fix the water main out at the airport, which was delivering fire suppression needs to the airport. It was, in the words of our airport manager, woefully inadequate and did not meet the requirements that are brought forward. So that was very positive. The grant was for $431,000 of an anticipated $750,000 budget, of which the remainder of that would come through reserve. An interesting point that the manager of the airport, Mark Fortune, brought forward was that the grant was going to be given in a lump sum, which generally we don't usually get it in the lump sums. And it was he was very excited about that because there's less bureaucracy involved, and they would have that chunk of money that they could use immediately. So I don't know, maybe see if might be interested in that too. But so that was from the airport. The last highlight was, and it was a report from the CAO, Doug Holmes, about the unauthorized camping that's been taking place, as I'm sure many of you are aware of, in the ACRD areas, and more specifically around West Main and those areas in behind the dump, but not exclusive to those areas. The purpose of the report basically was to, they had solicited information, or they had put out a survey and solicited information from the District of Tla-o-qui-aht Area C representative. There was also Co-ordinator Nation solicited their feedback, as well as Parks Canada and BC Parks. Tofino was asked, but I think there was just, because of the change in alternate directors and et cetera, we didn't provide necessarily direct input at that stage, but I certainly gave input at the West Coast Committee. In the end, it was mostly an information session looking at possible solutions. In the end, there was a suggestion that a working group or a committee to address this issue. I did speak in the sense that, once again, when we, for the committees, for the sake of making a committee, I'm sometimes reticent on doing that unless there's a very clear terms of reference, a very clear group of people working towards very specific goals. And I think that suggestion was clear, that there is an issue that needs to be dealt with. The ACRD doesn't have the direct resources to be able to deal with it. And so I think a working group may be coming together to address that issue. I believe that are the highlights of the West Coast Committee meeting. Tomorrow is the ACRD board meeting that will take place. And just as a quick aside, as an update, I think it is important that Tofino Council is updated on those meetings, as former Mayor Osborne had brought forward, in that there is a very direct relationship between the ACRD, the District of Tofino, and the services that it provides, as I pointed out with, for example, the West Coast landfill and our airport lands. So I hope to be bringing forward those meetings to Council for their information. And I promise I will just hit the highlights as they go forward. That's it.
Super. Any questions for Councillor Steer? No, I have a Alberni Clayoquot Health Network Table of Partners meeting, and I believe that Josie sat on that, so I got parachuted into that. But it is a great group of people. The mayor of Port Alberni, Island Health, Marcia DeWitt runs that. So it was really illuminating to see what's going on in our region, Port Alberni and the coast. There's a poverty reduction plan being developed right now, and further to that, there's Building Regional Prosperity Survey, which I believe we did distribute as a district on our Facebook page, did we not, at least? Yes. So I'm encouraging all the councillors to review that and fill it out and pass that on. And the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network Table of Partners is recruiting members. So they throwing that out there if anybody's interested in applying. They're looking for people to sit on their table of partners if you're interested in health in the region. There was some updates, lots of really interesting stuff going on to do with Island Health COVID delivery. They're working on that and in the background, getting that all set up for vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. One interesting thing I found was Sherry Minions from Port Alberni. Mayor there is, they're working on a really interesting project where they've partnered with 2 other organizations or organizational business to develop and deliver childcare. So they're trying to open up 80 spaces and of early childhood education and care. So they're very excited about that, and they're working very hard on housing as well in Port Alberni. Sounds like Port Alberni is ramping up and doing some really interesting things. That's it for me. Any unfinished business? Question period. Do we have anybody who wants to ask us questions?
No, no one has signed up.
No one has signed up. And all right, moving into closed session.
I move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91E of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements.
Second.
All in favor? Passed.